Today, we've got Derek Bates. Derek's written this book, Shadows on the Wall, and although it's a novel about democracy because Derek has strong reservations about the sort of democracy we have in this country. So I'm going to introduce Derek now, and you can see him here, and ask him, first of all, you've written this book, Derek, and you've written it because of your dissatisfaction with the way we're governed. Can you tell us why you're actually dissatisfied?
Yes, the problem we all have is that although we're told constantly that we have democracy, the reality is our democracy consists of little more than being given a piece of paper once every few years, 5 years in UK, on which we put a cross. And that decides the policy that the elected government will follow. And it also decides which MP we will have. Now, neither of those do we have any choice in. We're just presented with them. So it seems to me that that is not real democracy, and we need an improvement in that.
But, you know, we do actually change governments. If we have a government that's unpopular, we can get rid of it. I mean, how much further do you want to go than that?
What I want is for each one of us to have the ability to express our views. And with the advent of IT systems, every one of us, or virtually every one of us, has a mobile phone, access to emails and to the internet. So if say the government decides it's going to send troops into Syria, we should have the opportunity to be able to say yes or no. As it is, we just accept. There's no way we can influence government policy.
So you would want to influence government policy by policy, would you, using the internet and using social media? Isn't that populist rather than democratic?
Oh yes, it's certainly populist. I think it's much more democratic than we have now. Now, if your question is saying, do we really want to be voting on everything? Well, no, we don't need to do that. What I propose is that once every 3 years, or prior to the end of the 3 years, administrators will propose at least 3 policies, and they will be different, rather like the Labour and Conservative and Liberal governments are different, but they will be voted on by us, and we will actually not need members of Parliament to administer that. Members of Parliament would go to their constituency and perform the role that is part of their current duty to assess public opinion and to feed this back to the administrators.
So if they act as almost social workers in their constituencies, and we've got the general electorate making a decision through social media, through the internet, 3 times a year on 3 big topics, who governs in between?
No, I may have misunderstood, misinformed you. A policy which we have voted on would last for at least 3 years. It would only be if we had a big change, like we were being invaded by an enemy state, or more importantly, that we were thinking of invading an enemy state, then we would vote for any changes. And the current EU referendum is a good example where we don't need all the enormous election or referendum procedure in order to vote. We can vote by our mobile phones, and the same with any election. Currently, elections cost us something like £100 million every time. That can be saved by use of information technology.
So DA, who is on this webinar, has actually said the question that I would ask you. So you're asking to take away from MPs effective decision-making power?
Effectively, yes. I think that the need for MPs, 600 and odd of them, to go to Parliament is rather unnecessary nowadays.
Well, why do you say it's unnecessary for them to go there? Because legislation has to go through details. It goes to the House of Lords where it's amended again. And, you know, 3 events a year, you've got questions on welfare, on housing, on education, on so very, very many more. How do you manage to, you know, get rid of MPs on these topics? I don't understand who would make the decisions that we could trust.
Oh, we have administrators, and those administrators are qualified. See, currently, an MP actually needs no real qualifications. And if we look in the past, there was a minister who said, prior to being appointed, my only experience was running a constituency office. Now I have a budget of billions, and I have thousands working for me. Now, that isn't really a desirable situation. I think we need people appointed who are technically qualified. So a Minister of Health would be a man who either has been a surgeon or alternatively had spent a long time in the medical profession. And similarly with education and transport and all the other ministerial appointments.
Fabrice, who is on, says that the system you're suggesting is very similar maybe to the one in Switzerland, where they have a list of up to 8 policy measures for the electorate at each election. Is that the sort of thing you're suggesting?
Yes, except that I think we go farther than the Swiss system. We have the ability to vote via our mobile phones. And I feel that the Swiss system is far more democratic than ours.
Okay, so you have that system, but DA says you're relying on the public being well informed about the many policy areas. How can you be sure they make informed decisions? Because very often they make decisions on the spur of the moment, and what they decide in January may be different to what they would have decided in March.
Well, that's entirely true. We currently allow people to elect government. Therefore, we have a reliance on the knowledge of people. Now, a problem currently is that we are not given information, or information is not accessible to us to allow us to make decisions. Now, obviously, everybody doesn't want to be involved in deciding on issues, but there are a lot of people who are knowledgeable, educated, and so on, who would want to be involved in making decisions. And the attitude of the general public now is that Parliament and members of Parliament are unreliable. A Mori poll suggests that 87% of us believe that MPs don't tell the truth. Now, part of the problem is that we have voted them in, and they want to be re-voted. They want to be re-elected, and that means that they won't do anything, which is a necessary requirement for sustainable future.
I mean, Nick actually, to some extent, I think supports your view about the inadequacy of our electric system, where, we have a government that's often elected by 25% of the electorate. Is that a problem you think that we have, that, that governments are elected, but they're often elected by a minority of the electorate out there?
Yeah, exactly. And part of the reason that that happens is because we don't feel that voting at an election makes that much difference.
So you think, excuse me, you think that it doesn't make any difference, and that's why they don't vote. And you have MPs who are not particularly qualified. Ivan says good thinking to look at how we are governed, but Fabrice raises the question that I think we'd all would raise. Who chooses the administrators, and how do we stop them being corrupted? They have power, they have no one to be accountable to, they have no MPs to question them. Power is something which, when it becomes absolute, is a very corrupting influence.
Yes, and obviously that's something that has to be carefully thought out. And my view is that administrators would, via internet and radio interviews, television interviews, present themselves to the public. And the public will vote on the people that they thought were most appropriate. And they would then be if they didn't perform as the public felt they should perform, then there would be an opportunity to deselect them. Now, currently, our MPs, although there was an intention to have a recall if a member of parliament, if it transpired a member of parliament was not competent, that was quietly dropped. So we're faced with voting for a member of parliament whom we may decide is not competent. So the difference would be with the administrators that we could elect them or reject them at any time that it became apparent that they weren't doing the job we wanted.
Michael says if you do that, you're effectively giving more power to the media who can affect the decisions, more power to the PR people, more power to the spin doctors. That's not democracy, and you might end up getting the people that the corporations and the media want and not who are capable.
Oh, I entirely agree. But isn't that the situation we have now? Our MPs are subject to lobbying by big business interests and other interests, and as Will Hutton said, I'll just read what Will Hutton says, and Will Hutton is a very reputable journalist and commentator. MPs owe favours to close supporters that have to be settled, so they overpromise and they are prone to vanity and hubris. So what he's saying is that an MP becomes elected because he has supporters. When he's in power, those supporters, they don't do it because they're philanthropists. Those supporters do it because they want their views understood and acted on.
I mean, John says, and I can understand saying this, he still doesn't understand how you would hold those decision makers accountable for every decision they make in absence of any context. I mean, they're in isolation from any accountable body who can question them and scrutiny. And a part of democracy is having a scrutiny process. And what you seem to be doing is taking away all scrutiny from these super powerful people.
No, if I've given that impression, that's quite wrong. I think what we have now is a system where we have no input. my proposal is that we have direct input almost at any time. And you may say, well, that's going to overload the system. But I went to a business conference, and Alistair Heath of the Telegraph asked the members there were about 500 people, if they wanted to stay or leave the EU. And within minutes, on the screen beside him came a decision by the 500 business people. They wanted to stay in the EU. So, and that is a very simple process.
Nick keeps saying something which I think other people would say, though he says in a different way, that in a way, you know, this is a bit like changing the chairs on the Titanic. You know, you're having one system or another without changing the underlying economic system of money and usury and ownership that we have. And that to have a true democracy, you have to confront that rather than just changing the actors at the top.
Yes, well, I take his point, but I don't fully understand it, because I think at this moment he is right. But to change the system whereby we have the ability to change policy and to change administrators is much more desirable than we have at the moment.
I mean, David is on here, and David, I think, might agree with some of the things you say, but he comes up with this interesting quote that has been used, that politics is show business for ugly people. Is that something you would agree with? Because in a way, if you have your super administrators, your super managers on television presenting their case, it does the same thing, doesn't it?
The same thing as we have at the moment?
Yeah.
No, because how can we change? Just suppose the nation decides it doesn't like David Cameron. How do we change that? We haven't got any recourse. In this system I'm proposing, we would have recourse to do that.
So you would have a recourse system, would you, or any of those administrators? How would that work?
Well, if, say, let's draw a figure out of the air, 2 million of us decided that the administrator we had elected wasn't doing the job we thought, then he would lose his position. Now, 2 million isn't a real democratic amount. I'm just using that figure as an example.
But I mean, how would you differentiate the system you have with the present system in terms of the relationship with the public, in terms of informing them? In some ways, I can understand that you're sick with the political system we've got, and I think so many other people are. But in a way, you're creating an elite at the top, and that's what I think worries some people.
We're creating an elite at the top, which is exactly what we have now, isn't it? And my view is that we will have the ability to change that elite if it transpires they're not doing the job that we think they should do.
So you're saying we have an elite now, but the illusion of democracy, let's get away with that illusion and just have the elite.
Oh, you mean that the administrators become the elite?
Yeah.
Instead of the government at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the big difference is that we have no ability to make changes now, and with the system I'm proposing, we would have that ability.
Christiana asks you, can you outline the key benefits of digital democracy? Do you think it would engage the population in politics more? And do you think it would engage a new generation of young people in key political decision making?
Yes, I do. I talk with quite a few people, including many young people. I did yesterday talking to a young economist, and she said precisely that we are desperate to have our views acknowledged and acted on, but we have no route to do that as things are. So Christiana also asked about the key benefits of digital democracy. Well, first of all, it's so simple. As I said, in a business conference, within minutes, we were shown that 500 business people wanted to stay in the EU. And that required no big organization. Everybody had an app on their phone, and everybody just pressed yes or no.
So I mean, how would that engage young people? I mean, to answer Christiana's question more directly, I mean, she thinks, or maybe she assumes, that because it's tech, it's gadgets, people will engage with it. Is it the gadgets people engage with, or the policies, or the ideas?
Well, it's all three. We all love our gadgets. We all constantly act with our mobiles, or constantly are being invaded by emails, and we all respond to them. And we only got to go onto a tube train to see, an overland train to see how many people are on their mobile phones, and they're all interacting.
Okay. So the system you've got, or you're suggesting, is one that you think will be more efficient. Is the sort of rationale behind the philosophy you have to increase efficiency or to increase democracy?
Well, primarily to increase democracy, because I don't think it's right that we, in the 21st century, where most of us are educated and understand the stresses in the economy, have no ability to make our views felt. I mean, the reason, or the only route we have, and I saw it when I was in Parliament Square a few weeks ago, people were demonstrating and even tending to riot because they have no route to express themselves.
John thinks that maybe we should reform in a different way, and that is change the party system. At the moment, MPs are selected by parties by very small numbers of people, and he's arguing a different view. He's saying we should have primaries like North America, which is in a way the opposite of what you're arguing. How do you react to that?
Well, this may be a jaundiced view, but if you see the way the Donald Trumps of this world are proposing to do everything that they think the electorate want, even, as he said, he's going to build a wall between Mexico and America, and Mexico is going to pay for it. Now, that's a vote winner, but it's not really the sort of practical issues that we want to see discussed and decided on in this country. So I would be very reluctant to see us go into a system where we're doing the primaries like they are in America, because the last Obama one cost $7 billion. Now that sort of money would pay for lots of teachers, lots of nurses, and would stimulate the economy.
But if you have your system where administrators are chosen by the electorate by digital technology, it's the Donald Trumps that we're going to get. I mean, he's going to go out there just like he is now. He's going to say the things he is, and your elite administrators are going to be a bunch of Donald Trumps.
Well, that's a very interesting point and one that I haven't really thought about. We don't seem to have Donald Trump people in this country, do we? And Donald Trump himself is unique in America. I don't think America has ever seen that sort of man. But the difference would be, let's supposing Donald Trump gets elected, well, America has to put up with him for 4 years. With the system I'm proposing, we would be able to vote that man out of his position if it transpired he was doing things like he's suggesting, building a wall between Mexico and America. And he's also saying he's going to write to China and tell them to stop mucking America about. Well, I mean, that doesn't really convince, does it?
Okay, well, it doesn't convince, but I guess a lot of us will wonder whether your system won't end up with us having a lot of Administrator Donald Trumps, and I think that's the problem that some people have. Anyhow, we've come to the end of the half hour.
Yes.
What I'd like to say is thank you, Derek, for doing this. If people are interested, if you look on the right, you can see the link to Derek's book, which is Shadows in the Wall, and you can click on the link, and if you want to buy it, you can, and you can read his views through the novel more effectively. So there it is, Shadows on the Wall. And don't forget, Shadows in the Wall.
In the wall.
Yeah, I always say on the wall, in the wall.
Yeah.
And also, don't forget, if you want to find more about the webinars that we're having in the future, and we do hold a lot of webinars, we've got a lot planned. We hope to do more of these half-hour ones as well as our normal hour webinars. If you want to find out more about them, the best way to do that is to join Meetup, our Meetup site, which will give you a list of all our upcoming webinars. So click on there and join us there, and you will be very welcome to take part.